In this latest video looking at decimals, we'll be focusing on multiplying with decimal numbers. Now, multiplying with decimals is very similar to multiplying with whole numbers. Now, the difficult part is knowing where the decimal point goes in your final answer. Now, just like with long multiplication, there are several ways for you to multiply numbers together, and there is no right or wrong way of multiplying. It's all about finding the right one that works for you and, more importantly, gives you the correct answer. Now, the methods you can see on the screen are probably three of the most popular methods of multiplying, and hopefully you can pair up your technique with one that you can see on the screen. Multiplying with decimals, as we mentioned, there are several methods we can do. Now, what I'll try and do is go through the most popular methods for you to choose which ones give you the best, and also looking at the pros and cons of each method as well. So the first method we're going to look at is using estimation, and the method in which we do this is in the yellow box, as you can see. So the first thing we're going to do is estimate the answer. 2 is ignore the decimal point and multiply. And then the third step is compare the answer with in steps 1 and 2 and place the decimal point in the correct place. So what this basically means is, and I'll try and color code these questions just in case you are forwarding the video. So with regards to hashtag 1, step 1, so we've got 2.3 times 8. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that 2.3 is roughly 2 rather, and I'm going to times that by 8. So my estimated answer is going to be 16. Now, when it comes to step 2, is I'm going to ignore the decimal point. So I've got 2.3 times 8. And what I'm actually going to work out is 23 times 8. Now, to work this out, you can do any of the methods that you see in whichever method you choose to do. But just for time purposes, I'm going to say that I'm going to work out the answer as being 184. Now, what I'm now going to do is I've got the digits of 184, but I want an answer that is close to 16. And I need to put the decimal point somewhere where the answer in 184, the answer is close to 16. So it's a case of where does the decimal point going to go? Well, it's going to go there. So then the question 3 is then the correct answer then is going to be 18.4. And there is my final answer. So if we then have a look at the second question, and let's just get rid of this. And so with number 2, so here I've got 2.47 times 5.3. Now estimating this, I get that as being 2. 5.3 is roughly 5. So estimating that this answer is going to be around 10. So that's step 1. So step 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore the decimal points and I'm going to work out what 247 times 53 is. Now again, if I work that out in any way you want, I get an answer of 13,091. Now for this, I want to put my decimal point somewhere in this combination here in step 2, where I get an answer that's close to 10. So the only where I can put my decimal point is going to be between the 3 and the 0. So giving me the correct answer of 13.091. And there is my final answer. For step 3, question 3 rather. I don't know why I keep saying that because we're going in steps. So for question 3, so let's get the green pen. So again, I've got 7.41 times 10.32. So again, the first thing I want to do is estimate the answer. So it's 7 times 10. So I'm looking for an answer that's roughly around 70. And that's hashtag 1. Then for hashtag 2, I'm going to ignore the decimal point in both the numbers. And I'm going to work out what 741 times 1032 is. Now again, whichever handwritten method you choose, you should have the correct answer of 764,712. So 764,712. Now again, I want an answer where it's close to 70. So using the digits of 764,712, I need to put the decimal point where it gives me an answer close to 70. So the correct place is going to be between the 6 and the 4, and there is my final answer. Now this method seems quite straightforward, but it does have its flaw, and its flaw is when you're multiplying with numbers less than 1, sorry. So like questions like example 4, this is where this method kind of falls on its feet. And let me explain to you why that is the case. Now, again, if you've got questions like 1 to 3, not a problem. Again, estimating is not going to be an issue. But the problem I've got with question 4 is when I've got 0.23 times 0.0135, that estimating, well, roughly, again, in your head without going into proper estimating, that this is going to be 0 times 0, which is 0. Okay, now if you've watched the video on estimating, you always kind of want to round up to the nearest sig fig. So that's going to be 2 times, so it's going to be really what it should be is 0.2 times 0.01, and that will give you an answer of 0.002. And so that's the correct way of estimating. Now, the problem with that is that, again, it does take a little bit of practice for you to work that out. And so this is what we should get, but most people will get 0. And that's the problem, because there will be no different if I, let's say, 0.23 times 0.135. It's a case of, yeah, that's still 0 and that's still 1. So which one is it going to be? Now, if you've done it correctly, then this is the answer you should get of 0.02, and we'll remember that. So then if I then go through, let's get the yellow pen back. So then if I then do 23 times 135, then I'm going to get the answer of 3105. Now again, I need to make a number that's close to 0.002. And again, you can see that really the decimal place can only go there, which is wrong. So what I need to make sure is that I'm using these digits here. I need to make it a number that's close to 0.002. And the only way I can do that is by adding 2 zeros and then writing the 3105. Now, if this question 4 has completely confused you of something that actually was starting to make sense with questions 1 to 3, this is the problem when it comes to using estimation when multiplying with decimals, is that it's fine when both numbers are bigger than 1, but if it isn't, there is a massive flaw in this method, and it's very easy for you to go wrong if you're not doing it correctly. So in terms of the preferred option of working with multiplying with decimals, this is probably the next one, which is moving the decimal point before and after. Now with this, what we need to do is, now if I start off with question 1, so I've got 2.3 times 8. Now, typically speaking, and one thing I forgot to mention is you probably could, if this is your method of multiplying, then you could get away with just doing this. But this method only really works when you're multiplying a decimal number with a whole number. It gets a little bit more complicated when you are multiplying with 2 decimal numbers. And if you are going to do that, then this method would work as long as you are adding the zeros and you're multiplying and you go through the steps, and then that will be okay. But again, it's a lot of faff. So going back to the original question 1. So what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that both these 2 numbers that I've got are whole numbers. Now, in order to make this number a whole number, I need to move the decimal point 1 place to the right. And by doing that, I'm going to get 23 times 8. Now, if I work out what 23 times 8 is going to be, that gives me an answer of 184. Now, because I moved the decimal point 1 place to the right at the start, what I now need to do is move the decimal point back. And so because I've moved it 1 place to the right, I now need to move it 1 place to the left. And if I do that, again, if you don't see a decimal point, imagine it's like a full stop. It gives me the correct answer of 18.4. So let's have a look at number 2. I've realised that I've switched from red pens to blue pens, which was defeating the object of having difficult questions. Hopefully I won't do that again. So again, with 2, I've got 2.47 times 5.3. So again, I'm going to move the decimal point 2 places in this number to make 247. And I'm going to move it 1 place in this number to make it to 53. So in total, I've moved it 3 places to the right. Now, if I work out what this is, I get an answer of 13091. And then, so from this number, I need to move the decimal point 3 places back. So I've got 1, 2, 3. So the answer then is going to be 13.091. And there is my final answer. And then looking at question 3, sorry. Not good for messing up your counting on a maths video. So apologies. So for question 3, I've got 7.41 times 10.32. So again, I'm moving it 2 places in this number to get 471. And I'm moving it 2 places in this number to get 1032, giving me a total of 4 places. Now, if I work this out in any which way of multiplying that floats your boat, we get 764,712. Now, if I move the decimal point 4 places back, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So the decimal point is going to go there. I get the answer of 76.4712. And there is my final answer. Now, one thing I would recommend that you do is try not to leave your answer looking like this with your arrows and your loops and potentially having 2 decimal points. It's never good. Always try and write your answer neat on a separate line where there's no loops, no arrows, and definitely not 2 decimal points, because that's a big no-no in maths. And then finally, now where this method comes to actually its proper use is questions like questions 4. Now, as we saw in the previous example using estimation, that when working with numbers less than 1, it can prove a little bit difficult, whereas this method is actually not that bad. So here we've got 0.23 times 0.0135. So again, I need to move it 2 places for this number and 4 places for this number, giving me a total of 6 places. So then if I've got 23 times 135, I work that out and I get an answer of 3,105. And I'm just going to do is just double check to make sure that that is correct, which it is, yep. And so from 13105, I'm going to move the decimal point 6 places. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is where the decimal point is going to go, and what I do is I fill out the empty spaces with zeros, and that does give me the correct answer of 0.003105, and there is my final answer. So this method, I would say, is definitely a method and way to go when it comes to multiplying decimals with decimals, because it works for all possible outcomes. It might not be the quickest, it might not be the easiest, but it's probably the one way of maximizing your scores and maximizing chances of getting it correct. Now, there was a way of using diagonal lines. Now, if you've not been shown how to do long multiplication with grids with diagonal lines, I will show you on this, just to kind of give you a bit of indication of how it works. Now, before we get started on the 3 questions you can see on the screen, then what I'll do is I'll just make up a question. So let's say we're doing 18 times 132. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a grid. Now, with this, it's a little bit more complicated. Now, I realise I'm going to do the opposite order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up this grid, and I've got 1, 3, 2, and I've got 18, and I'm multiplying. Now, from this, what I'm now going to do is draw some diagonal lines. Now, it's important how you draw your diagonal lines, and your diagonal lines should go from one corner to the square all the way across to outside the grid. And so what you should have is something that looks like this. And now what I'm going to do is now cross multiply the 2 numbers. So here I've got 2 times 1, which is 0, 2. If it's a single digit, just write 0. 2 times 8, which is 16. 3 times 1, which is 3. 1 times 1, which is 1. 1 times 8, which is 8. 3 times 8, which is 24. And now what I'm now going to do is add together the diagonal lines. So here in the first one, I've got 6, and I've got 2 plus 1 plus 4, which is 7. 0 plus 3 plus 2, which is 5, plus 8 is 13. And I'm going to carry the 1 over to this one. Then 1 plus 1 plus 0 is 2, and I've got a 0. Now, this here is your answer. So the answer to this question is going to be 2, 3, 7, 6, and there is my final answer. Now, for time purposes, Now let's say we had a decimal point in there, so let me just add a decimal point. So let's say decimal point was 1.8 times 13.2. Then again, I'm still going to have the digits of 2, 3, 7, 6, but the question is, where does the decimal point go? Now, if I put my decimal point in 13.2, which is here, and I put my decimal point in 1.8, which is here, and if I match up those points, those dots, those decimal points will match up at this point here. That's the point where they will match up. If I just do it in, let's try and go for a distinctive color that I've not used. I'm struggling. Let's go for white. So they meet up at this point here, those decimal points. So there and there, and then once they meet, if I go along that diagonal line, this is where your decimal point goes. So the answer to 1.8 times 13.2 is going to be 23.76. Now again, if you're not too sure how I've all done that, let's just quickly go through the 3 questions on the screen. So here we've got number 1. So I've got 2.3 times 7.5. So I've got a 2 by 2 grid. Now it doesn't matter which numbers you have, but I would say it's usually common to have the longest number going across and the smaller number going down in terms of length, not value. I'm going to draw my diagonal lines like so. And I'm going to do my decimal point, which is here and here. And if you wanted to, you could kind of work out where your decimal points are going to go. So my decimal point is going to go here. And the next thing I need to do is do the multiplying. So I've got 3 times 7 is 21, 15, 14, and 10. And then 5, 2, 7, and 1. And that will give me an answer of 17.25. And there is my final answer. For number 2, again, there's rubber. And then for number 2, we'll do exactly the same. So here I've got 10.2 times 4.8. So I'm going to draw my grid. And I've got 1, 0, 2, 5. And I've got 4, 8. And again, just going to try neatly as the best that I can. You might find that your diagonal, if your squares aren't squares, you might find your diagonal lines going a little bit skew-iff. And so my decimal point is here and there. And so the decimal points will meet at this point here, meaning that my decimal point in my final answer is going to go here. So I'm just going to write it there. And the next thing for me to do is then do the multiplying. So I've got 20, 40, I've got 16, and no, I haven't. I've got 8. I've got 16, I've got 0, 0, 0, and I've got 0, 8, and 0, 4. And then working this out, I've got 0, 10, 3, 11, 12. And then I've got 1, 9, and then 4. So that gives me an answer of 49.2. And there is my final answer. And then finally, for question 3, so again, let me just quickly get rid of all of this. If you're still with me and awake. So with question 3, I've got 0.25 times 0.0007. So I've got to do a 5 by 3 grid. And so let me just split the 5. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3. So I've got 0, 0, 0, 0, 7, and 0, 2, 5. The decimal point is here, and the decimal point is here. And again, do my diagonal lines. You can see how it's really important that your lines, your grid squares are pretty neat. But we'll go from there. And where is my decimal point going to go? The answer, well, it's going to go at this point here, which means that in the answer, it's going to go there. So working this out then, a lot of these are going to be 0. So the first are definitely all going to be 0 because I'm doing 0, 0. This is all going to be zeros. Make sure your zeros don't look like 6s. And that's going to be 0. And then 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 5 is 35. So working this out, I've got 5, 7, and 1. And then 0, 0, 0, 0. And that'll give me a final answer of 0.000175. And there is my final answer. So hopefully this has now made you a little bit more confident in multiplying with decimals, whether it's with whole numbers or decimal with decimals. And I will include a worksheet with some answers in the description below for you to practice everything that you've learnt in this video.